Hi. After watching the video, click the link in the description to download the program.
The honest truth is that IBS can turn your world upside down, and it can also catch you off guard. So I discovered the hard and embarrassing way. When it strikes, it can mess up and disrupt everything going on in your life. IBS doesn't care if you're in the middle of a multi-million-dollar deal. It doesn't care if you're on the sideline watching your kids play Little League. It doesn't care if you're on a second date with someone. It really doesn't care at all. If that's not bad enough, it also affects you in different ways, even between your episodes. Once officially diagnosed, if you can call it that without any real tests, I found myself feeling anxious all the time. When is it going to strike next? That was why I found the doctor's advice to stop stressing out to be a bit ironic. I felt like it was impossible to enjoy life like it should be enjoyed. I certainly couldn't relax. In fact, I'm almost certain that my constant worrying also negatively impacted my condition even more. IBS changed me. I wish I could say that my initial confirmation from the doctors gave me comfort, but it didn't. I couldn't see how taking both laxatives and Imodium could help me, nor could I see how I could relax more and stop stressing when I had no idea when it was going to catch me out again. I did seek second and third opinions, but they all pretty much gave me the same advice. In the next year or so, the situation got even worse. Sometimes I'd be off work 3 or 4 days in a row. I'd lock myself in my room in total darkness, praying that it would quickly pass. I lost friends because of my IBS. It's not because they weren't supportive of me. It was because I just couldn't face going out in the real world. I went where I had to go and then headed immediately home. I'd cancel on friends and family at the last minute. I'd turn down invites. And not surprisingly, the calls, messages, and invites slowly began to cool off. My career suffered too. Forget the day when I had to run out of the boardroom holding onto my stomach in agony. That day was just one of many. And because I'd had no cure, it meant that I still had IBS. Chronic fatigue set in. As a result, my productivity suffered too, to the point that I was hauled in front of my boss and asked if I had some dependency issues. I think he was referring to drugs or alcohol. To be fair, I'd lost weight, looked pale, and had permanent dark rings under my eyes. I wasn't a pretty sight. I explained that I'd been diagnosed with IBS, but this meant nothing to him. He had a business to run. I got a formal warning. I got a written warning. I lost my job. The tipping point. Losing my job was a bit of a reality check. I guess I could have fought it. I possibly could have sued them. But what was the point? I had to figure out I needed to take control back. Because who in their right mind would ever employ me in such a state? I wouldn't. Desperation sunk in. No way was I going to pump myself up with concoctions of laxatives, Imodium, and antidepressants. I joined every IBS forum I could find. I spent hours chatting on Facebook to people that were also suffering from it. Some people had it even worse off than me. There were some that had lost their homes and their families. How could one condition that some stated wasn't even a proper medical condition cause so many problems and wreck so many lives? I'm just so thankful that I have a happy ending to my story and my IBS has well and truly gone. Unfortunately, there are so many other people out there that can't say the same, because just like I had once done, they rely solely on the advice of doctors. The triggers. To say I became a little obsessed in ridding myself of this condition is an absolute understatement. All you had to do was go into my computer history to see what I mean. Some friendly people online had been experimenting with treating their triggers. What did I have to lose? Surely, focusing on the triggers could at least minimize my flare-ups. Doing this could help me get back on track with everything. I was desperate to try and rebuild my life. What I had learned about IBS was not one-size-fits-all. Every single person is different, and what might trigger my IBS could be something completely different for someone else. Unfortunately, it wasn't as easy as the doctors made it out to be. Dieting. One thing many doctors told me was to change my diet. They told me to eliminate things, but they didn't tell me what to remove. I had no idea about how to eliminate and then re-add. Was it a matter of going cold turkey with certain foods? I had no clue. So while the medical experts' advice sounded good and made sense to me in theory, it was difficult to put into practice without guidance. So I took it upon myself to try almost every diet I could find online that came up when I tapped the words diet for IBS. High-fiber diets, low-fiber diets, low-fat diets, the ketogenic diet, a gluten-free diet, and a low FODMAP diet were just some of the diets I attempted and failed at. Nothing seemed to work. Again, if I were armed with the information about how to get rid of IBS back then, things would have been completely different. A random online encounter changed my life. I lose count now as to how many online groups and forums I joined. However, one thing for sure was that these were the groups that I regularly and still do interact with. The difference now is that I'm often the one giving advice and pointing people towards the things that can change their lives. On particularly bad days, I send public pleas for help and advice. I wanted to know anything and everything that has worked for other IBS sufferers. Jalissa contacted me on a random Saturday morning. She'd seen a post that I'd written, the post that referred to doctors telling me to eliminate things from my diet without giving me any details as to how to do it. Elimination was the right answer. She explained to me her family's personal experience with IBS and how elimination had worked for her niece. But it all had to be done in a systematic way. Otherwise, the elimination process would be a fruitless exercise. She definitely had my attention. How I became IBS-free in literally no time at all. Apparently, I didn't need long to reduce and perhaps get rid of some or all of my IBS symptoms. I'd been fighting these symptoms for years. For the longest of times, I didn't even know I had IBS. I'd even lost the job that I'd absolutely loved because I just couldn't get on top of things, which included my mental health. This short period of time for healing myself compared to the countless days of anguish that I'd previously experienced was a drop in the ocean, and something I was 100% willing to have a go at. There were rules to be followed to get the answers I was looking for, which I did, and what I found out shocked me. 1. I learned that there were a few foods that set my IBS off. They were not dairy or wheat products like I'd originally thought or had been told. 2. I discovered I've always been quite an anxious person, long before my IBS problems. The IBS just exasperated everything. I learned that I couldn't cure it, but I sure as hell could get it under control so I didn't have to suffer from it on a day-to-day basis like I had been. 3. I found out that doing some simple meditative exercises and practicing some forms of mindfulness actually ease many of my triggers. They're so easy and also helpful in many other aspects of my life that I still to this day do them despite being in the clear. 4. I'd pretty much consider myself to be IBS-free. Well, I haven't experienced any of those awful IBS symptoms that are commonly associated with this crippling condition for well over a year. I've learned that there are ways to beat it and minimize the risk of having an episode again. And now that I've made those necessary and very easy tweaks in the way I live, my quality of life is so much better. Empowerment and control are just 2 words I'd use to describe what this simple program has given me. And obviously, because everything has a knock-on effect, I feel more relaxed, less anxious, and much happier. Here's to being IBS-free now and the rest of my life. The truth about IBS. Once you go through Jalissa's step-by-step plan, you'll quickly see and understand that there are more triggers and secondary triggers than what research tells us. It's about understanding your body and your environment. Each person is different. But as well as triggers, there are other factors that contribute to IBS, which, in a way, I guess, could be classified as triggers as well. Your gut's flora, its ability to chemically break down food, and intestinal and gut muscle spasms are all pieces of the bigger puzzle. So, what's it all about? This thorough and well-laid-out step-by-step plan addresses the physical and emotional triggers and the possible medical explanations of IBS. I found the program easy to follow, and because of it, I am now a happy and healthy person once more. A clear-cut diet, explicit instructions how to eliminate and reintroduce food, exercises, supplement advice, and additional information about alternative therapies are what makes this step-by-step plan more useful and valuable than anything else I've read, including advice I received from doctors. Because, let's face it, all the doctors I'd ever spoken to said that I could never get rid of my IBS. And how wrong they were. Because I never suffer from it anymore. Here's the thing. To make it work, you've got to follow it. No cutting corners, no nonsense, but it works. I'm forever grateful for the advice I received from Jalissa that day. She reached out at the right time when I needed help the most, when I felt like I was losing control. I followed the step-by-step program and her advice down to a T, and even in week 1, I began to notice differences. I feel like a whole new person, mentally and physically, and I'm happy to report I am currently IBS-free, and I have been for some time, and I credit it all to this amazingly informative plan. Although I do consider my IBS gone, I still follow the plan. I consider it to be my Bible. My diet is on point. The exercises have become a regular part of my daily life. I supplement with vitamin D, turmeric, and magnesium, and I've never felt happier and healthier. Not only am I back working, I've also managed to land a position I love. My friendships are back on track, and I've even found happiness in love as well. Okay, so this program isn't magic in the fact it will find you a new romance or rekindle friendships, but it will point you in the direction you need and give you all the necessary information. One thing I can vouch for is that it definitely worked for me. Over to you. If you suffer from IBS, whether it's a mild form or chronic, I know you're not 100% happy. I also know that you've been suffering from pain and discomfort. The thing about this step-by-step plan is, it is so incredibly easy to follow, like super easy. I didn't need to buy anything new. No expensive diet foods, no gym memberships or equipment, no expensive experimental drugs. Nothing. The best thing is I don't have to spend endless hours in doctors' surgeries or hospitals waiting for answers anymore. I'm proud to say that I haven't stepped into a doctor's office for almost a year and a half, which is quite a feat for somebody that had once frequented every family practice in the locale on a regular basis. The exercises I did and still do at home, sometimes when I have a moment, I also do them at work, because they're that short and that easy. And when I have to travel for work, I often find myself doing them on the plane. They're great because I can incorporate them into my everyday life with ease without any disruption. I've learned to change my lifestyle. I continue to follow all the instructions because by doing this, I know that I'll be able to maintain a life free of IBS and its crippling symptoms. Click below to get your easy-to-follow step-by-step program today. Nothing to lose. What have you got to lose by trying this method out, other than your awful IBS symptoms and unhappiness? Even in my desperation, I was a little skeptical of it all, especially since I tried and failed so many other methods, and no doctor I'd visited could help me like I'd hoped they would. This clear program isn't made up from nothing. It's based on scientific, factual evidence concerning the triggers of IBS. It's an easy-to-follow plan, and because it's so easy, it's not that difficult to include in your life and make the necessary tweaks in the way you live. And if you're anything like me, once you start noticing the differences, you'll become determined to make it work for you and continue with the program well after the suggested time is up. Jalissa's program is different to the rest. It's so simple. It's easy to follow, and it also offers some step-by-step instructions. What makes this plan even more unique is that it looks at IBS holistically. It looks at every aspect of IBS and all its triggers. From there, everything is separated into manageable chunks, which make it easy and even fun to follow.
Click the link in the description to download the program.